let's get back to the chorus and let's get back to these gems that we dropping. All right, so let's get back to the low end. Most importantly, though, inside this mix that's already going is we have this whoop whoop. This like little, I would call it like kind of like a percussive bass hit, like a bass drum slide or whatever. And most importantly, we had to make that really like cut through the mix. So I used the BX subsynth. I like how it gives like a resonant poke to the drum.
Say, enemies won't try, but them no fit.
So then after that, we just did a little bit of like notching because it added a little bit of mud. Then we just compressed it so it could be held in place, especially right here where it gets more active.
Wipe my tears away. See the journey no easy, but you still the rain. You wipe my
Pretty fast attack with a musical release that I calculated from the actual BPM of the song itself. So that just helps it like like remain in the groove.
See the journey no easy, but you still the rain. You wipe my tears away. Take, see the journey no easy, but you still the rain. You wipe my tears away.
Like we don't need the extra transient from this little bass that's gonna take away from the claps and the rims and stuff. And speaking of the claps and the rims, I think there was just like a little bit more compression right here for these two things before we actually moved on to the clap and rim.
Holy fire.
See, same release, still just musical.
Fire, cover me. Oh Lord, from the sun. Oh, Jehovah take control. Yeah, holy fire, cover me. Oh Lord, from the sun. Oh, say.
All right, and then now it's time to move on to more of the drums and stuff like that. So we had like a lot of fucking drums. Usually I start to solo like the rhythm and I'm like, damn, we got tons of shakers, tons of African instruments. So I'm like, what's the most important one and build from there. So there was a little bit of harshness on it. So I used a little bit of the soothe, and you see I was just notching out everything, but make sure I didn't lose that grit and that dum dum, that clap, 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 that presence. So I used the gem dopamine. That sounds a little bit smoother, but still present. And then we had, what is this, rim? So I really use the same exact plugins, but the most important thing is I used a little bit of transient designer to make it smoother. Sometimes you don't have to like use soothe all the time. You can just take off a little attack, maybe take off a little sustain. I made it just especially because the rim comes across sooner. You can see that clearly. I wanted it to cut off faster. Great way to get it to sit back in the mix. The gem dopamine, you just throw it on the default preset and it makes things gritty. But then I use this Spectre towards the end. You know, these moves are not all done one by one. Like I'll be like towards the end of the mix, oh, this needs to cut through. Let me throw on this Spectre. All right, let's just keep like bringing in more shit. So a lot of the music was on the left-hand side, so I decided to use a panner to keep this like active and moving and stuff like that. But it's only going for the right side for the shaker. That's a good way to add some bounce, okay? And then what else do we have? We have like the split X2. I don't even know why the fuck I used that. But yeah, then we use like the harsh hi-hat preset. We use a little bit of lo-fi to grit it back up and a little bit of this. And another reason the shaker's on the right, because look at the hi-hat. pan this over to the right hand side because it kind of sounded like a shaker, but I just felt like it was grooving. So sometimes I'll go back between the left hand side and the right hand side to see, all right, where does this groove sound good at, you know? You have this little big thing. It sounded a little bit too big compared to the kick and the bass, so I cut that off. Now let's move on to the music. First things first is the main guitar, just a simple EQ because it was kind of stepping in front of the knock of the kick. After that, I kept it with full frequency because it just sounded good as fuck, you know? And then after that, let's look at this. What is this? This is like a counter melody. So they don't step on each other. I made one just normal, but the first one, but then I put a stereo widener on this one to make it super wide. So you have a way to distinguish both of them in the mix, you know what I mean? Like they're not just two pancakes on top of a breakfast sandwich. Like you can see, oh, there's a little bit of cheese, there's a little bit of ham, you feel me? And then I just use like a little bit of a shelf lift. And what is this right here? This like stereo spread. I like how this gives like it makes it wider, but also makes it distorted, you know? So new texture makes you be like, oh yeah, I see the pepper. I see a little bit of the onion underneath. I see a little bit of how the bread is different from the croissant. Then we threw just a little bit of limiter on just on this one shot because it just kind of got too loud at some point and we want it to be controlled and smooth. That's what we're going for with this track. But then after that, look at how many like plugins there are where I just don't do anything. Like there's a bunch of places where I don't do anything. And then when I do it, it's when I do it, it's because honestly, it's just because like it needs a slight thing. If I had to go back and link this, I would do this. I would take off the unlink because the instrument is unbalanced. You see how there's like one guitar and the other? That's how I would approach it. So it just helps nothing really poke out. Everything feels glued together rather than depending on the master bus, my actual leveling. And then I feel like this was taking a little bit of high end from the vocals, so I shelved it off.
Carry me. Oh. City
There's also a choir too, so it's probably was taking away presence from the choir. It's almost like when you EQ, you should not be listening to what you're EQing. Listen to what it's helping out in the community of the mix, all right? And then what is this?
Cover me when I dey go, cover me when I dey low. Your love be my only code. Jehovah take control. Yeah. Cover me when I
like another African instrument or something like that. And then at that point we had like just these two little rolls, and I just added one the Avid. Like sometimes when I want to make it loud with a little bit of dirty gain, this is a great plugin.
Yes, the love that flow, carry me. Oh, oh, oh. See the journey no easy. They
One of
use
those little African.
peace of mind. Now you to give me peace of mind. Now you to make me still the shine. So cover me when I dey go, cover me when I dey low. I love you.
A little bit of that 0.1 distortion really like gives it something aggressive. But with the music bus, let's go over that real quick. Yeah, we had a CLA 76, and it's just that made everything louder. I just used that to make it loud. I like how it makes it sound dirty with texture. But then let's look at the rest.
Peace of mind. Now you to give me. Enemies won't try, but them no faith win. All who are by my side. Ever give me peace of mind. Now you to make me still the shine. So cover me when I dey go, cover me when I dey low. I love you my only.
Adds a nice weight to the music. I was trying to push up the mid range just so the music still felt full and lush, and I wanted it to feel like a full pillow full of cotton. That's why you see I'm going for the mid range. I'm boosting up my mid range to high mid a little bit, and then I start to cut the mid range. I was really just working on it to get things to feel full. Then I used a little bit of the stereo widener on the master plan because I like how it sounded, and just a little bit more of a cut.
Give me peace of mind. Now you to make me still the shine. So cover me when I dey go, cover me when I dey low. I love you my only code. Oh. Jehovah take control. Oh. Yeah, yeah. Cover me when I dey go, cover me when I dey low. Your love be my only code. Oh. Jehovah take control. Oh. Yeah, only fire. Cover me. Oh,
Here's another great way to change focus in a mix. You know how my drums are like in the 500, and I was boosting it. I was boosting down there. Now I go to my music bus and I just kind of boost everything higher to make everything shift. So my drums are mainly in the low end, especially with the congas and stuff. All that low stuff is in that low end, and now I'm starting to push my music up in the higher end. I want it to be a heavenly angel and not be a little bit devil underground. All right, so this is pretty much the end of this episode today. I'm happy that you guys are here with us on the course. I'm happy that I'm showing you this radio ready course, a course that, you know, we just showing the gems on how to get your shit ready for streaming so you guys could blow up, and I appreciate you. So we will see you in the next episode. I think we are going to be talking about the lead vocal. We're going to be talking about the lead vocal, maybe the background vocals, and we're going to see what's going to happen. All right. Appreciate y'all now. Peace.